All set?
Looks good to me. Oh, yep.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the second edition of the Complex Systems lecture series. I like the way we could just have speakers come and we'll call it a lecture series. I'm really pleased today to welcome Bill Cheswick, who's now at AT&T Research, not to be confused with Bell Labs. He used to be at Bell Labs like 20 years ago, I believe. Yeah. He's about to celebrate his 20th anniversary there. Of course, he worked other places in between. Actually, Bill's well known for his work in firewalls and his firewalls and security book, which you may have seen on the poster. Graduated in '74 from Lehigh University and has been making trouble. I think it is probably a fair way. When did you start at Bell Labs?
I started in '87.
'87, okay.
Yep.
Neglected to provide me with a bio, so I'm just winging it.
Oh,
What I think is most amusing, Bill's actually very well known within the internet world for, among other things, producing some of the very first maps, quote unquote, of the internet. And I think in 2000 left Bell Labs to one of their startups called Lumeta, and he was a chief scientist of Lumeta for until recently, and about 6 months ago has gone back to the sort of AT&T fold with AT&T Research, which is now in Florham Park. What's more interesting, I think, in Bill's, unbeknownst to Bill, is on his website, he has this fun little section called Brushes with Greatness, and which I think a few of those are most interesting. Apparently, Dr. Ruth has told his wife and him to try a new position, quote unquote. He's juggled with Penn and Teller, Penn of Penn and Teller, and most importantly, quote unquote, every president whose hands he has shaken was subsequently impeached. And with that, I'd like to welcome Bill Cheswick.
See, you could have looked up my biography instead. That would have been okay. Yes, Dr. Ruth, what a stitch. Thank you very much for having me here. I see you're saving money in the auditorium. This is the coveted post-lunch snooze room. I will do my best about it. I should tell you that I started at AT&T Research about 6 months ago, and at the advice of a jillion of my technical friends, tried out a Macintosh, and within 4 hours decided I was never going back. Now the reason that's relevant today, this is not a Macintosh commercial, well maybe a little bit, is that I've been giving talks for quite a long time and they've all been in PowerPoint, and now I'm migrating over to Keynote. And for a talk like this, I would normally just go to the PowerPoint and grab some slides and put them together and that would be it. However, here I'm retyping them, and as a result, what I'm trying to say is I didn't really do my homework very well. My slides are a bit of a muddle. There are a lot of them, and I've decided if the theme doesn't flow smoothly, give them lots of different things. So if you find I'm flagging for a couple minutes, just stand by. We'll change subjects shortly thereafter, and perhaps it'll be an hour worth your time. I was hoping to come here today and perhaps learn a little bit more about gamma ray lasers from Bose-Einstein condensates made out of positronium. However, apparently a lot of those guys are over in Spain. So we'll just talk about internet security and take it for that. Okay, so here we go. Ooh, here's the R. There we've got the timing set. All right, I love this. I get to see better things than you do. You just get to see that, and I get to see what's coming up. This is terrific. So the third character was sent on the internet. Characters were sent from UCLA to SRI in 1969. The first one was L, the second one was O, and the third one was G, as in login, and the server crashed. And at that point, the internet, as it was, had what, a success rate of 66% or 2/3, which of course brings us to the question of measurement. What unit of measure would you say for the stability or security of the internet at that point? It was, I don't know, 0.67 reliability. We need a unit of, it was 0.33 morons. I'm not sure what to do here, but we're going to get back to that a little bit about measuring security because this is something a lot of people want to do, and I have almost no idea how to do it. But we've been dealing with similar problems. Now, to be fair, the server, I mean, this was research software in 1969, and it isn't quite fair to compare that to a security hole in Apache that you'd find today. The folks writing Apache should know better. And, and in fact, they do for the most part, which is good for us. So there's been a lot of bad stuff on the internet, and I decided after starting this list that this was also not completing my homework. The Morris worm started in 1988, and that really was the first noticeably bad thing happening on the internet other than people trying to break in by hand. There were PC viruses. The first denial of service attacks occurred, the SYN attacks occurred in 1996. Then distributed denial of service, and now the pros are involved. And that is the sum of the internet. Thank you very much for coming. Okay, so I am going to have to learn that when I switch screens, I have to hit the button or you can't see it. Security properties of the early internet was, it works. If it's 1983 and you're logging into a remote machine, that's cool enough. If it's 1985 and you can mount a remote file system, that's really cool enough. And the security aspects, well, we'll get onto that some other time. And for some of those protocols, we're still waiting. We still run many of the protocols. I'm glad to say that many of the worst we do not run anymore. Things like Telnet are pretty rare. SMTP we run, it's a little different. FTP we run a lot. One hopes the servers are okay. They've had plenty of time to get hardened. Early on in the internet, the whole idea behind the internet was the end-to-end principle. We'll put the smarts on the outside, and the center of the internet will be dumb, which of course is exactly the opposite of what the phone company had in mind, and one of the reasons it was so hard to convince the phone company to get into the internet business early on. But this meant that two innovators could do pretty much whatever they wanted without anybody else's permission, and that has been the fertile ground where the 1,000 flowers or the 65,000 ports have flowered. The man in the middle is dumb. And this was pretty much the rule. It was pretty much a wide open internet until '87 when packet filtering came in. It became clear that you didn't want to talk to everyone, that end-to-end principle was a good idea, but some ends were more equal than others. And they were found in the router and could be implemented pretty easily inside things like those newfangled Cisco routers. ScreenD, Jeff Mogul did ScreenD, which was another one like that. I arrived at Bell Labs almost exactly 20 years ago. And Dave Prezzato had just built an application-level gateway, to the best of my knowledge, the first one. He didn't trust the internet. He didn't trust all those Berkeley services out there. And he built one. And I walked up to him at the Christmas party and said, hi, I'm Bill Cheswick. I'm starting here. And I'd love to run your firewall and be postmaster, which is sort of like volunteering for proctologist. He was delighted. I decided this was a great way to learn about this newfangled network, and turned out to be a good place to be. And of course, there were also people over at DEC who were working hard on application-level gateways. By 1990, I was working at Bell Labs in the Computer Science Research Group. I ate lunch with Dennis Ritchie and that crowd. And these people all wrote papers. And I had just redesigned the firewall. And I said, OK, I'll write a paper on it. And I did. And I gave it to my boss. And he said, this is a good paper. Oh, cool. So I submitted it, and it got accepted. And there are a couple of things in that paper, looking back, I realized about 5 years ago, I actually coined the word proxy in its current use then. I didn't realize it. I mean, I remember seeing I need a name for this service. Okay, it's a proxy, and putting it in the paper. Didn't realize that that actually was the coin for it. And so that was pretty cool. That was one of the things the paper did. The idea of the paper was, if this is your current firewall, then this must be a better firewall. And notice firewall as diode is still a pretty good measure of what's going on. You want the people on the inside to reach out, but the outsiders not to reach in. It still works. One referee helpfully suggested that the paper probably should do this. But actually, the lasting contribution of this paper, and I toot my own horn on here, was this sentence, that all of the gateway's protection has by design left the internal AT&T machines untested, a sort of crunchy shell around a soft, chewy center. I have heard this dozens of times in talks all around the world, and it's never been attributed. That was my simile, damn it. Behind the firewalls, of course, the soft, chewy center has been a problem, and I'll talk a little bit about that today, and more about why they're chewy. Our firewalls also did not allow actual IP packets through. Those packets have options and things. They're complicated and they overlap. And people might be able to do tricks with them. So we're not going to let the end-to-end go. We're going to explicitly break this. You talk to me, I'll tell the guy inside what you want to know. The advantages are, of course, that the expertise is found at the gateway. By the way, we were right. There are lots of tricks you can play with those things. And we've seen a number of papers over the last 15 years playing with tricks in the TCP/IP protocol. The advantages, of course, were security is cheaper. You don't have to deploy security in all the machines. You can do it in this one place. It stopped the Morris worm, which was pretty cool. I got into work and Peter Weinberger was on the phone confidently calling other sites saying, did you get the Morris worm? We didn't. It turns out most of the reason we didn't get the Morris worm at Bell Labs was smart, but some of it was dumb luck. There was a back door that never got through. It turns out the worm would go through a list of hosts, infecting each one. And Bellcore was totally infected, and each machine was going through the list and getting slower and slower, it's quadratic, I guess, and never got to the last entry, which was a Bell Labs machine that had no firewall. So if it had ever reached the end, it would have gotten in. And that actually, that flaw was part of why I redesigned the gateway at Bell Labs. It wasn't the gateway that was wrong, but the gateway itself had some things that almost didn't work. Firewalls book came out in '94. Thank you for putting it on the poster. The timing was astonishing, and I'd say pure dumb luck. Sold 100,000 copies. It was really quite a delight. The second edition, nothing. I mean, a few, but not much. And at this point in 1999, the web was just spreading. We wrote in the Firewalls book, the reason most people connect to the internet is for email. And I'd say that's probably a fair assessment in 1993. Oh, sure, you and I would FTP files around and so on, but it was really email or getting net news a little faster that was the reason. There was no particular crypto available. This was before the crypto wars. And everything was Unix. I mean, PCs. I suppose there were some people running Windows with Wollongong TCP/IP. That's still out there, by the way. I worked for a company that scanned companies, and they'd have factory floor machines, numerical control machines, equipment on the floor of manufacturing stuff that was made in the mid-'80s, and it's still working just fine, making widgets. And the TCP/IP inside, Wollongong, it's still there. And most of the servers and protocols were of the it works quality. So the disadvantage of the perimeter defense was that you lose innovation potential, and this was especially a problem at Bell Labs. I'd have some bright researcher come up and say, I want to try this new protocol with the internet and your stupid firewall's in the way. And I'd have to figure out what to do. Usually there was a way around it. I could punch a hole, or his service was an outgoing TCP and there was a way to do that. And sometimes they just moved outside the firewall, and then it was their problem. The Chewy Center in general was a problem. But it isn't really, it's really a problem. By 1996, here's a slide I had for what the inside of Lucent looked like. 5 firewalls, all of my design. They'd gone and done the belt and suspenders thing. There were a variety of connections going in, approximately 200 business partners. We'd circle the wagons around Wyoming. Were those connections to the business partners safe? Well, some were. The rest were not. And this is much worse nowadays. Well, of course, this particular company doesn't exist, essentially. But this situation exists throughout industry, and it's an ongoing problem. And in fact, I started an entire company based on this. And what we did was we mapped corporate and government networks. This was, well, what they do, if you're running a big network like this, you have a list of official network addresses. These are our official networks. This is, Colorado, and this is the Kansas City site, and here's London, and so on. We've got a bunch of addresses. The program gave me these addresses, and I ran out and scanned the network and explored it. And anything that wasn't on the list came out in red. And so some of these, they looked at them and said, oh yeah, well, that's Seattle. That's supposed to be on the list. That's okay. Debugging the list is okay. But a lot of things were, these guys, those bastards were supposed to be disconnected 2 years ago. So these intranets were not well explored, and there were holes. People could get in from the outside. Here's another one. This is actually, I'll tell the world. This is Lucent. This is Lucent back in 1999. Blue is Lucent. Agir was the green, and these little bits of pink around here were Avaya. And you can tell which network was easier to split off. I'm not sure the Agir folks ever liked being part of Lucent that much. So it was a couple of quick slices with the unplugging. And here's another typical network with a big leak in it. This was another problem with perimeter defenses. Your firewall down here might be solid, but then the guy in Oklahoma, and you know, this was Oklahoma, he looked and said, it's those bastards in Oklahoma. I knew they weren't closing that gateway. We'd find stuff like that. Here's one of the smallest networks we ever scanned, and this was a leak. You know, so this perimeter defense is great in principle because you have a perimeter, but really it doesn't help much. You really want the machines to have strong host security. Or, in other words, you want to practice internet skinny dipping. Internet skinny dipping is using the internet without a firewall. It's sort of like skinny dipping. There's a certain amount of danger and excitement involved. By the way, the Danish word for skinny dipping is swimming. And I decided around the mid-90s that I was going to try to see if I could live in a world without firewalls. Could I have my host secure enough that I would be confident, and I mean confident not in some hubris sort of way, but in a confident engineering sort of way. Nope, son, that just can't happen, to live outside the firewall. And it's a research question. Can one use the internet in a rich and useful way, end-to-end connectivity the way it was intended? And if so, what does it take? And what are we worried about? Well, the threat models, there are three of them really. There are more, but these are the biggest ones. Attacks from outside. Evil people poking your computer when you're not looking and breaking software and breaking in and doing stuff. And that is basically the way the attacks were for the first 15 years. Evil email, you couldn't do anything to the V7 text mailer, to the best of my knowledge. I've never seen anything like that. These are people probing your servers, which have crappy software on them. And we'll talk about a little bit about software later on in the talk. Invited attacks. These are, for you Buffy fans, when you actually let the vampire into your house. You click on the wrong place, you accept email from someplace, and it's something evil. And it's inside the firewall, it's all in your close inside protected area. And clicking or doing the wrong thing, it's an easy thing to do. Grandma does it all the time. And the other threat model, of course, is someone eavesdropping, watching your traffic go by and getting your credit card number, social security number. And so those are the three things that were really the biggest problems. And what does it take to deal with these? Well, for a secure internet connection, you got four factors. You got the server. That's the guy who's being called, the machine. Highly resistant to crafted attacks if you get it right. That is the web server you go to, Amazon.com. Could be your own machine if someone's connecting to it. You need a secure server, a place to go to. You need secure communications, resistant to man-in-the-middle attacks, so that you can talk from the client to the server in a safe way. And you need a client strong enough to protect the user's secrets and the software integrity on the machine. So you got the endpoints. Oh, and then there's this fourth entity, the bozo in the chair. And by bozo, I mean all of us, because you can't always tell what you're doing, even if you know what you're doing. I remember downloading black ice into my Windows machine once, and I turned it on to, I'm a security guy. I'll turn it on to the setting of, don't allow anything until I approve this kind of connection. So every time the system, this new Windows system, tried something new to communicate with the world, it would ask me first. I'm a security guy. I hope to know what's doing. And it took about a week to get through all of the things going on. Now, obviously, the first hour, there was a lot of them. Frobos72.dll wants to send a UDP packet to port 23 at this place. Go or deny. I don't know what Frobos is, but I know that I did just do something that seems to be related. Yeah, okay, we'll let that go. I did that for a week, answering yes or no, the way we expect grandma to do it on these systems. And I mean, the machine was never compromised that I could tell, so I guess I gave the right answers. But this stuff's really hard, and even for this purpose, I'm a bozo in the chair. So those are the four elements. And before we get into the security elements, let's do a little NIST-like thing and talk about measuring computer security. We start, of course, with this slide, which I assume you all have to memorize before you get your badge. It must be. I didn't see it emblazoned over the entranceway or something, but maybe in the morning at 8:30, somebody comes on and they play music and you quote Lord Kelvin. You really want to measure stuff. And I can tell you that there are people out there who desperately want to measure computer security. I remember a general coming up and saying, son, I got this network. I need to know how secure it is. Give me a number. I can give you a number, General. No, I need a real number. Well, you mean a positive non-integer? No, I need a number that comes from something objective. Well, I don't know about that. He wanted to be able to say, well, last year my network was a 42 and this year it's a 58 and I've justified my budgeting. Let's move on. Or something along those lines. And many want to do this. But it's really, really hard. I don't know how to do this in a fancy or even a useful way. Well, I'm going to show you a couple of really stupid, simple ways that I think are actually useful. But if you assume that Vista was a gigabyte of software, I don't know, that's probably an order of magnitude in range. That's 8 gigabits. And if you change one of those bits, just one of them, you've opened a security problem if it's the right bit, and who knows which bit it is. How do you measure? How do you know which bits there are? There are people who will sell you business of, I'll tell you how secure your firewall is, or how secure your setup is, or how secure the internet is. And if you look and very carefully, they get all this objective data from all over the place. Somewhere in there, in step 2, then a miracle occurs. Not in this case. Step 2 is, then some human looks and makes a judgment call. That looks like that's about a 5. Okay, and then the process continues, and here's your number, 89.3. And of course, this is unsatisfactory, and Lord Kelvin would not approve, and maybe we could do something about it. So I thought, let's try it this way. Measuring, this is actually the network services security of a computer. How secure is a computer connected to the internet? Well, the problem is, at least for our first threat model, that people connect from the outside to insecure services. Well, they connect to services and some of them are insecure. So I submit to you that if there are fewer services, you are less likely to be running one of the ones that has a security bug in it. That's not a very broad argument, but if you're running 10, there's more likely to be a bug in one of 10 programs than a bug in one of one. So 1 would be a more secure computer than 10. Now, this is not rocket science, but it is a number I can give the general. And it sort of helps. It's the number I give me. So let's take a look at some of these numbers. Here is the netstat. By the way, that's a Unix command. But those of you who go to the DOS window, I know we don't call it that anymore, you can still type netstat -an and see this. And this is what I found on the Windows ME machine in my house when I tried this about 5 years ago. Each one of these lines, you don't actually have to know what this means, except that each one of these lines is a potential door into the machine. Some of them are more potential doors than others. In fact, there's 1, 2, 3. There are 3 of them. The actual security here would be 3, because there are 2 UDP services and 1 TCP service. Each one of those is a possible way to break into the machine. So for this, I would give it a security rating of 3. Not very sophisticated, doesn't really talk about attack cross-sections. This might be some big, awful security problem, and in fact probably is. But at least 3, that's a number. And why is that number interesting? Because with Windows 2K, the number got bigger. 6, 8, 9, well, probably not that one. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm picking these out for a reason. 14, 15. Win2K is 15. Now, all I'm saying is that 3 is probably better than 15. Not a great thing, but it's a measure of security. Now all I need is a unit of insecurity. The bogon, the aims. I don't know. I'll leave that to you guys. Okay, Windows XP, pre-Service Pack 2. It's getting bigger. They're adding more stuff. They're adding more doors into the house that can be broken into. And some of these, this guy right down here, I don't know what most of these are. This one right there, NTP, is the Network Time Protocol, which comes from the nearby University of Maryland. I actually know what that is. This machine is offering to tell whoever will connect to it what time it is. But it's a nice service. I use it. I need to know what time it is. But this came on every Windows machine out of the box. They were all ready to tell what time it is. And maybe there's a bug in the NTP program. I submit that this would be a safer machine if that were turned off. Not how much safer, well, 1 bogon, whatever, 1 unit safer. So basically, some of the guiding principles for servers or for computers are you've got to get out of the game, as Fred Gramp said, or as Mr. Miyagi said in Karate Kid 2, best block is not be there. To give you an example, the FreeBSD machine that I tend to run this is actually one service. Now, I care a lot about whether port 22 has a bad problem. That's SSH. A number of you care a lot about that too. But that's the only one. There's no NTP. There's nothing else running there. I submit that this number, 1, is a better security number than 3 or 12 or 20. And you'll see that this sort of breakthrough thinking in measurement of security problems will come back later in the talk. I don't know what you do with this exactly, except this is what I look for when I sit down at a computer that someone thinks is safe. Now, to be fair, Microsoft was not the first to do this. This problem, the problem of these network doors, had been in these machines since they started. Remember, back in the 80s, it was, heck, this works. Let's put in all the things that work. And here was a list, a much later one, from SGI, from their IRIX machine. Each one of these lines is a potential door into the machine. It's okay that you don't have to read, you can't read it. Just the colors. It's all right. Red were ones that I thought were pretty sure were insecure. Green were probably okay. And yellow, the yellow one was, I wasn't sure, but I thought it might be bad. And it turns out 3 years later, a serious bug was found in it. That's Telnet. That was the SGI Telnet bug. So this was long after the internet came out. These are, by the way, all these are early 80s, mid 80s services that, gosh, they work. Isn't it great? By the way, there's a second page. There was more. So this number is worse than Windows XP. Of course, when I get into one of these machines, the first thing I did was turn off all of these things. What was that other yellow there? Oh, 9FS. No, never mind. That's a Plan 9 file system, which is probably okay. And of course, they're still making mistakes out there. Here's a paper, for example, out of Berkeley, where people aren't checking input. Now, you know, I started programming in 1968. And one of the things my teacher said was, be sure to check your input before you use it. Seemed like a good idea at the time. And I have always been pretty careful to check my input, even till today. But of course, a lot of the cross-site scripting attacks we're seeing these days are people not checking their input. Now, I suppose I could give this talk and be one of those old guys to say, back in my day, we knew how to check input. We don't, you know, the kids these days. But to be fair, we didn't check input that much back in those days either. I had a friend who went to a computer show, a Philadelphia computer show in the early 70s. And no, it was a little later than that. There were trash 80s around. There were lots of, so I guess it was mid-70s. And they all were running little games. You know, enter 1 to 10 for which game you want to play. And he'd type 32,000. And it'd say overflow at line 23. And then he'd go to the next one, 1 to 10. He'd enter different big numbers, and nobody was checking the input. He just went around crashing machines all over the floor, leaving salesmen saying, whoa, what happened? So people didn't check input back then either. These things continue, and I'm not sure why. If you're looking for insight here on that, it's obviously quick and dirty. I will sit down and write software and say, yeah, this is just turning on my front outdoor lights. I don't need to do a lot of security checking and stuff. It's just a 3-line shell script. It'll be gone by the end of the week. And of course, it's there 10 years later. New bugs continue to appear. Now, secure servers. We can do pretty well with secure servers. Ask Amazon or FedEx. I don't have any special knowledge of how they run their servers. But there are businesses out there that are doing just great with their servers. Maybe they're having attacks. Sometimes we hear about them. The TJ Maxx break-in has been inconvenient probably for everyone around here. Turns out that was not a break-in through an outside server. But this is where we have our experts. They are running the servers. This is where you buy the expert. Think about, well, FedEx, for example. You can go to FedEx and ask where your package is. Now, FedEx knows where your package is because they've got a database in some really important machine. They're crown jewels, really, inside the firewall, protected behind all sorts of stuff. You've made a query to this web server sitting on the outside on the open internet with hackers and Chinese and all sorts of evil people. And, sorry, and this thing has to make a query through to the crown jewels and say, where is this package? And it has to come back. This takes a lot of engineering, and I submit to you that most people are quite good at this. Most sites get it right. Some don't, and you get to lose your social security number when that happens. But they can be quite robust. You can build things with SSH and postfix, something I like, and maybe Apache, and the systems will not default. These systems don't default to safe servers. You've got to do it, but the engineers there take care of it. Okay, which brings us to secure communications. In 1990s, there was the great crypto battles, centered in a place near here, I understand. The crypto wars, the problem was we couldn't have secure communications. Nowadays, an astonishing thing happened in June 2003. The NSA announced that crypto, the AES encrypto standard, this is the new advanced encryption standard invented by two Belgians and gone through the vetting process, was suitable for type 1 cryptography. Now, most cryptographers don't use the term type 1 cryptography. It's not normally found. It is more common in this part of the world. Type 1 cryptography is what the government uses to describe cryptography that's suitable for handling top secret material. And what was astonishing about that, I should put lots of asterisks about this. The NSA said properly implemented and vetted. It isn't just getting the right cryptography algorithm. You've got to get the cryptology right, and that is a very big but. You've got to get all sorts of things right, and this is how you get around stuff. But they said if you get it right, you can use this for type 1 cryptography. The astonishing thing was the NSA has never, to my knowledge, publicly characterized what kind of cryptography they use for anything before. This was an amazing announcement. And what it tells you really is that the communications between two ends potentially is unbreakable. Because they're probably, unless they know a hole in it that they don't think anyone else can find, they're probably not going to encourage people to use this for type 1 cryptography. Now, of course, they still have to approve it, so there's some asterisks, some things about that. So that really gives me a great deal of confidence in the connection. Not that I'm worried about nation states cracking my end-to-end encryption, but it's nice to know that we've got something close to that. SSL is holding up well. That came out in the mid-90s. And so is SSH. So we've got secure communications. I think that part is down pretty well. There are key distribution issues. Secure clients. Well, is Windows a secure client? How many people in here do their online banking using any sort of, do online banking? Yeah, most of you. Feel pretty good about that. I do. There are certainly hacks that can be there, but obviously we're all doing it, and it hasn't bitten us yet. I submit to you the internet's working for something that's pretty desperate. You know, if someone else steals that and empties your account, it's hard for you to prove that it wasn't you. And that's the game you have to play when that happens. So using Windows has had its fair set of problems. Secure clients running Windows. Here's another situation. See, we'll get a show of hands for this. It's the weekend or something like that. You've just driven an hour and a half or flown. You're visiting grandma. You spend an hour chatting with grandma, catching up on things, and then the next 4 hours cleaning viruses off of grandma's computer. How many people? Yeah, this is sort of a denial of spare time attack. And I used to do this every 2 or 3 months with my dad. We'd leave him with a clean machine and come back 3 months later, and he'd clicked on the wrong place, or something had reached in, or he'd turned something off. And you can make a lot of money. You can make $100 an hour or more on this. Microsoft didn't care about this in the 1990s. They were in the, hey, look, it works stage. And then in February 2001, Bill Gates said, okay, we really mean it. We're going to get this security right. And of course, a lot of us said, well, we'll see. Does he mean it? And it became clear over the following year or two that they really did mean it. They've been retraining their people. They put in new software tools to find bugs in it. They've gone back and vetted things, checked things out, and of course have come out with with Vista. And I think it's going to be an improvement. Now, this is, for those of you, I'll remind some of you of the 12 labors of Hercules. One of them was cleaning out the Augean stables. 3,000 oxen had lived in these stables for 30 years, and his job was to clean them out. The task is similar. He used, at least it sort of rhymes with Microsoft's job, he used 2 rivers to wash out the stables. something would not pass EPA muster this now, I'm sure. Think of the eutrophication. But this sort of problem, by all accounts, Windows XP was 40 million lines of code. To try to clean up this software mess has never been tried before. I've never seen it. And of course, they have a lot of money on it, but it's hard. And the question is, can they do it? So there's some good signs on Vista. One of the signs is it took longer to come out than they expected. And I don't think this was just a management problem. I think they dove down into it and said, holy smokes, this is worse than we thought. And I think that's why it happened. It wasn't a Mythical Man Month problem. Another good sign, if you're running software on these systems and you need to change them, or you need to get new software if you're getting them from somewhere else, because the old stuff doesn't work anymore because the security is tighter, that's a good sign. That's like the first trip to the dentist after 20 years. It's going to hurt, but your teeth are getting cleaned. And a lot of people went through this pain going from Windows XP to SP Service Pack 2. I expect their upgrade to Vista is going to be easier than those who are still back on some of the older systems. This is a good sign, though. This means that the security is actually clamping down, and it should hurt a little. Another good sign, they're sending people out with charts like this, saying, look, we have all these wonderful features, and these other things don't. Now, I'm not going into section reordering, exe randomization. These are all things that make it harder to compromise a particular binary in a machine, something that shouldn't happen in the first place. And look, Windows Vista does all this except section reordering, and Mac OS doesn't do any of this, and so there. This is a good sign. They're trying. They're using tools like this. This helps make things better. Bad signs. Well, first of all, last I knew, they were doing blacklisting of things like attachments. An attachment comes in, you look at the extension and say, is this a bad one? And you have a list of known bad ones. This old security maxim, you don't do it that way. You have a list of good ones. If you're not on the good list, you get thrown away. And so I know why they did this. It helps cut down on user calls. But still, that's a bad sign. That's still weak. The DRM requirements, trying to make sure you're not illegally watching a movie, means that the software has to reach in and break itself if anything's wrong with the software or hardware that you might be stealing the movie. This is software designed to break itself. Now, it's hard enough to write software that doesn't break it, but to have stuff that will break itself and do so without breaking is really hard. You can see Peter Gutmann's work. He's written up a lot of this stuff. I think this is a problem that they're eventually going to have to give up, and I know there are business drivers for this, but I'm guessing DRM is going to go away. And I haven't heard of useful sandboxing, and I'll get a little more into sandboxing later, inside Windows. You really want software to be, okay, you want it to protect itself, but then put it inside something so if you fail, it doesn't get away. Belt and suspenders. 2 firewalls, I called them belt and suspenders. I would have run out of names for the other 4. Okay, how about Unix systems for a secure client? Here we go. How are we doing? Pretty well. Okay. Well, Dennis Ritchie said Unix is an administrative nightmare. He ought to know. He invented it. It really is tough. It's got so much power that many things can go wrong. And if you're running Firefox, Thunderbird, or these other giant client programs, this is a problem because they have to take so much out. You're inviting trouble in from the outside, and they have to be good at so many things. Movies, pictures, sound, mail, and so on. How about Microsoft clients? It's a nice machine. Well, they've been below the radar. The people who do these attacks, and I'll talk about them in a little while, want to compromise as many machines as they can. Macintoshes are what, 1 or 2% of the market. I actually think they're likely to double or quadruple their share, which still won't make it a big part of the market, but maybe not a bad investment. The OS is probably a better platform. If you're going to put me in charge of fixing software, I'd rather start with what they have in here. On the other hand, they have lots of open source software they got from the world and never updated. So if you have some ancient version of Apache, I don't know if they run Apache, but let's just say you do, in your Mac, and now there's a much newer version outside, that means there are a whole bunch of bugs that are known about the one you're running, and it's in the Mac and they haven't fixed it. So what about an owned computer? Someone breaks into it. These things are horrifying to us, though maybe not to my dad or to grandma. The invader has unlimited access to the machine, and it can be even possible to damage the hardware. This I will leave as a thought experiment to you folks. What sort of hardware can you damage in a machine, and what would it take? And do the routers have that hardware? So who does the breaking in these days? It used to be teens, right? Hackers, the movie, desperate, socially maladept males, and even more maladept females doing stuff, breaking in, cool names, smoking, that sort of stuff. They're still out there, but this is big business now. They're criminal enterprises. I'm getting tongue-tied here. The Russian Business Network, is that what it's called? There's a lot coming out of Russia. There are terrorists, yes, consultants. Spook spikes in the military all need to do this stuff to keep their offensive equipment around. That doesn't mean they run the botnets, but they certainly have them around in case they need them. And of course, a botnet is a horde of owned computers. The machines are subjugated automatically by viruses or that sort of thing. Might typically have 100 or 10,000. Some botnets are over 100,000 machines. These are all computers that you can control from far away. Okay, all of you guys, focus on Amazon and send packets. And they can produce huge waves of attacks. 10, 20, 50 gigabit a second attacks focused on sites. They can also do other stuff with own computers. They fix the computer so other people can't break in. And they have no, we were worried back in the 80s that, well, you're going to erase the C drive. And viruses did do that. They did some wonderful things. I remember two things that viruses did in the late 80s. One was if you were typing quickly, it would transpose letters occasionally. Now, I think you could send someone into retirement with the right sort of just messing around. Doggone it, my typing is just going to hell, Martha. I can't figure it out. And a related one actually would search the machine for spreadsheets and occasionally flip digits or switch digits. You know, the good old days when we had creative stuff. What do we have now? We have something like FatBot, and you don't have to read this. FatBot comes with a user's manual. It has a lot of commands. You can log into it. You have the time of day displays. It's its own little operating system. This is something you load into grandma's computer and helps you run it behind grandma's back, because grandma's running a machine that's 4 times larger than the Cray we ran at Bell Labs in 1990. And she isn't going to notice if I have this little user interface in the background or a web server, or even if I'm doing 100 kilobits a second of phishing on her line, because her line can handle it. This is just a typical thing. You can go look up these things and find this stuff. By the way, if you want to build viruses, there are actually kits you can get online. Go Google for them. They have great GUIs and so on. It's all yours if you want them. What do they use them for? Spam relays. Very important. Distributed denial of service attacks. I'm going to digress for a moment. When we were writing the Firewalls book, Steve Bellevin and I had this question, and this is an ongoing question with security. If we tell people how to do stuff, aren't we teaching the bad guys how to do stuff? And the answer is yes. We're also teaching good guys. Well, so this is sort of dual use. How much do we say? Are we sort of oblique? Never leave this like that because bad things could happen? Or do we say, if you do this, they'll break in this way? And Steve and I decided that the bad guys had plenty of time to break in stuff, plenty of documentation. It was the good guys who needed succinct description of what was going on. And therefore, it was more efficient to actually tell what's going on, with one exception. And that was a SYN attack. Now, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to get into the technical aspect of the SYN attack. But it is an attack on a machine that makes the kernel slow down. And we couldn't think of a way to fix it. And we decided, it was actually a paragraph we deleted just before we sent the postscript off to the publisher. We said, no, we're not going to tell how the SYN attack works. And I guess that was okay for 2 years, but the SYN attack did show up. And I'm not sure we slowed that at all with it. But the problem was, should you talk about this sort of thing? And we've decided, yeah, you really should. I guess you can get too detailed. But that's an interesting problem, and I'd welcome feedback afterwards if you like. Denial of service, so that had happened. It turns out, by the way, that when these attacks showed up, ad hoc mailing lists showed up. Within a week, there were dozens of possible solutions and mitigations. Several manufacturers had patches out within a week and a half. that did a reasonable job of mitigating SYN packet attacks. There are other things they use. Grandma offers phishing and keyboard sniffing, of course. Okay, so how do you measure, get back to this, measure Unix host security? And this is going from a user who's just got regular privileges to becoming root. Privilege escalation, as we call it. It's much too easy in my judgment, and I'll show you why in a moment. I prefer single-user machines that just gets out of the game I'm about to describe to you, but that I realize is not always an option. Though it certainly is more than it was in 1980 when you needed the Orange Book to divide up computers for many things. So let's see. It's, oh, no, that's a Windows error. Never mind. Okay. Here is my measure of a Unix host security. The question is, the problem is Unix has a bunch of commands that can be run set UID to root. When you run the command, it runs as high privilege, even if you don't have high privilege. How many commands are there? You run this simple little command, find permissions of that user root, print, and you do a count. And does this sound familiar? Each one of these is a potential doorway to root from user level. If any one of these 44 has a bug in it, a security bug, then you can break in from user to become root on the particular machine this was. This was a FreeBSD machine. Okay, these are, for you Unix folks, these are some of these are familiar commands. Okay, so what do? Remove the ones I never use. As the famed security experts at Microsoft say, you should never be vulnerable to a weakness of a feature you do not use. I'd ask for a show of hands of how many people use every feature in Microsoft Word, but I don't have to. There's nobody at Microsoft who uses every feature in Microsoft Word. Okay, so here's that same list, and in red, these are the right colors for you, bichromats? Yeah, that's okay. All the red ones are commands I never use. Here's one from the early 80s, still there. rlogin I don't use, key info I don't need, batch I don't do that, I don't run yellow pages. So let's get rid of those, get rid of the doors. I'm making the number security count, this is some new number, go from 44 down to whatever this is. Okay, that's the list, smaller list. These are programs I'd be likely to use. But wait, not all of these programs need to run as root. This is the principle of least privilege. This has been around for a very long time, and it was enunciated nicely in 1975. I believe, and I haven't done a rigorous study, that none of the red ones need to run as root. They may need privileges of some sort, but not all privileges. And I can think of ways of engineering the system so that they won't be root, which means you may be able to break into the line printer system, but you won't get the keys to the whole castle. And so this is plus or minus a little. I'm hand-waving a little bit there. This is what's left. There are 5 of that original 44 that really need to be there, in my judgment. And so 5 is a better number than 44. Not world-class measurement, but it's the best I can do. So how is the world done with this? Well, here is the LaTeX table input from the book. System number 242 potential doors in the AIX system to root. I mean, how secure could that possibly be? There've got to be holes in there. I haven't gone back to look. Some of these vary. There was a while when Sun actually tried to beat back this number and got it down. Unix systems tended to be around 70. Sun got it down to 50. Here is a Linux. No, where is it? Oh, dear. I should have marked it. One of these is one that was a Linux prepared for a school. And I'm not seeing. Oh, here it is. Right here. They said, we're going to give this Linux to every student. We might as well clean this stuff out. They got down to 26. I don't think they did the last step, and I don't blame them because that's a lot of work. But this is probably more likely to be secure or less likely to be insecure than this one. And you can run this, run that on your own system and see what number you come up with. So measuring security is hard. For safes, you can do it. This safe is secure for 30 minutes against 30 minutes of peeling or attack with a burn bar. And of course, 30 minutes is important because that's how long it takes for the cops to show up. So that's a great security measure. This is something that you can try. You can stick bad guys on it in jail and see if they can do it. You can have engineers designed to this, and that works pretty well. Nuclear weapons. If you capture a U.S. nuclear weapon, it contains a variety of technologies, PALs and so on, designed to make it really, really hard for you to set the thing off. Or for that matter, to get stuff out of it in a useful form and so on. And there is a classified amount of time that it's designed to withstand your efforts on. My guess is that amount is about 30 days. And of course, that's giving them 30 days to come find you before you do something bad with it. Again, it's something that's useful. Now, computers, I just read a paper. People said, we're going to put your computer up someplace and offer the world $50,000, and if they can break in within a week, then they failed the test. So the measurement of how long people are trying and the incentive, the amount of the reward, and a few other things. This would be another measure of how secure it is. But of course, does that really give you, if they break in, you know it isn't secure, but do you really feel comfortable if they fail? We don't know how to measure this. And then we get to the bozo in the chair. You're going to attack him forever. I mean, grandma can be fooled. Everyone can be fooled. You look at the locks on the web page. If you go to my web page, there's a lock at the bottom of it. Click on it. I've got a few hundred locks I collected from Google. Grandma doesn't know where to look for the locks. She doesn't know what she's going to do. And of course, she's going to get offered things like this. It's unreasonable to expect users to understand the security implications of what they're doing. They don't know what's inside the computer. Heck, almost nobody does. In fact, does anybody? Don Knuth has been suggested that someone should do a paper or a movie or something 1 second in the life of a PC. A nanosecond by nanosecond accounting of what happens in 1 second. And then it spends 43 milliseconds doing this and so on. I'm not sure. Experts can't tell. I couldn't tell with black ice when it's working. And it's poor engineering to expect users, humans, to pick passwords that computers can't guess if you're given enough computer time. My bank card has a 4-digit password. Well, this is laughable, except you only get, 3 tries? And then it eats the card. This is how you get out of the game. Of course, I didn't get to pick my password. That's another thing. It wasn't going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, was it? There's a lot of resistance to secure clients. My dad said, what's wrong with this? I mean, every 3 minutes, an X-rated window would pop up, and he'd just click it and keep doing his work. He was getting his work done. Naive users have a high tolerance for these sort of infections, even if it's a lost weekend for the techies. I mean, maybe you didn't want to spend any more time talking to grandma. I don't know. Is secure software really that hard? I think the answer is clearly yes. We've learned that. People don't want to pay for it, and even if you do, it's still really hard to do. We don't have the right tools. We don't know how to prove the protocols are safe. We're still pretty much in the good enough stage for almost anything. And if you're in a startup, and I was in a startup, you can't afford to wait around for it's really great unless you're in a security startup. You really have to get something out the door and be selling something, not a promise of something that's going to be secure a year from now. So the entire economics works that way. The security, we do know that security has to be designed in at the beginning. We've known this for a long time. I found the attitude of the designer is the key. More important than vetting the software is just spending 15 minutes talking to the person who designed it, if there was one person, and try to understand what their approach was to the whole thing. Small is beautify. Well, you can see that it's a new slide. But obviously smaller things, fewer lines of code, better security. Lines of code is probably not a bad measure of security, inverse, of course. And also, the last thing is it'd be nice to converge on a version. Do we really need to change how our mailers work? Actually, I've just spent the weekend updating my Myth TV box because they changed stuff and it was just awful. But once it's working, it's very nice just to have it sit there, not change. Now, I'm not changing it because it's a pain to change. But when you converge on a version that works, it'd be nice to stay that way. Why do we need a new PowerPoint? For more features that we're not going to use? There are successes in software. For example, speaking of Don Knuth, tech. Now, one of the techniques that worked was if you find a bug, you'd get a check from Don Knuth. And of course, the value of the check would double each year. And after a while, he was writing really beautiful checks because he was hoping that you would much rather frame a check from Donald Knuth than cash it. That's not a bad model to have the programmer's own bank account on the line. And tech has done really well. Maybe we should just have Don stop writing volume 4 and write us a really good kernel or a C library and, a good trip test that checks it all out. The benefit we have is that now it's done. Tech, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't changed at all. I'm sure the people are working on macros or something since he finished it, and it just works. And why can't we, as computer users, converge on a set of tools that just work? Postfix was another one. It's a Unix mailer done by Vista. It had a couple early problems with it, but he was an extremely diligent and security-conscious person, and it's a very nice piece of work. Even SendMail, which was a bad security problem in the mid-'80s, is sort of getting annealed to something better. I wouldn't use it. I'm not sure about DocMaster, but that was up for a long time. That was a computer run nearby. Can we safely skinny dip with Windows? Well, I ran Service Pack 2 running talks like this for 10, well, not 10 years, but I ran various Windows for 10 years without ever getting a virus. At least never got a warning. I ran antivirus software, but it never told me it happened. I think you can if you're doing restricted sort of thing. But as soon as you get off the reservation, you start clicking in the wrong place, or people start sending you bits of the outside world, you can have problems. British Petroleum has just put 20,000 employees outside the firewall on Windows machines. They think they've got them secure enough. I'm going to watch that with great interest. Certainly you can't do it with students. When they come home from college, we have a special network at home. It's the outside crap net, and we just assume they're totally infected and they don't get any special access to us. Teenage gamers, and grandma. Well, maybe not grandma, but perhaps grandpa is still going to click on the wrong thing when it comes through. Has skinny dipping worked for me? Yeah, it has. I've been able to do most of what I want to do. There are some services I have not run because I've thought they're too dangerous, and I've probably missed out on some research possibilities. I've never built a wiki because I don't know wiki software I'd trust, that sort of thing. There are very few hardened network surfaces running on a few machines. I've never had an undetected break-in. Okay, I used to say that when I worked at Bell Labs, and there was someone who told a friend of mine while sitting in a jail cell, the friend of mine was not in the jail cell, that they did actually break in through our undetected break-in using that telnet hole that I had shown you before. I'm actually pretty sure they haven't because there are other things behind it that they would have rung bells with. But it's really hard to do. And putting dangerous services in sandboxes, I actually ran a web page that was undefaceable. And I could stand in front of a whiteboard, blackboard, whatever, and explain to a system administrator in a couple minutes why it was undefaceable. And I think again, this isn't complicated, it's simple security. But it's worked great for me. And let's see, we'll try this. Okay. Finally, we'll go to a couple of ideas. One idea is Windows OK. Now, I am not known for my marketing prowess, and maybe this isn't the name it should be. Our company that was examining intranets, I said, well, I suppose we could call it tenartney. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue very well, but that's intranet spelled backwards, which means it's a name you may remember for the rest of your life. Anyway, Windows OK, what grandma really needs. A thin client. Oh, how embarrassing. It would be fine for maybe half the Windows users. This one, reasonable to skinny dip with, locked down, has a number of features missing. It would have no network listeners. Default secure settings, you don't need someone to set it, but if they do set it, they stay that way. So once you leave grandma's house, she's not going to change it next week by clicking accidentally in the wrong place. All the security controls in one or two places. Windows doesn't get that right now. They're trying. And as I mentioned, the locks. Windows OK. There should be nothing you can click on, an email or a web page, that will hurt your computer or your software. We don't want to tell grandma, don't click on dangerous things. Don't click from messages from strangers, which is sort of advice that she used to give us. No portal, it just shouldn't be, there shouldn't be anything bad you can do, and let's engineer it that way. No portable programs, they really make me nervous, unless they're signed appropriately. Reduce privileges, I talked about. Sandbox, put dangerous programs in there. Office, okay. Whoops, that was a bounce. Here we go, this works pretty well. It's a nice machine, I must say. Office, okay. No macros in Word or PowerPoint. No executable code in PowerPoint. And the only macros in Excel let you do computation. No new menus or anything like that. And now let's go the forward direction. Now, host level security is not going to stop denial of service attacks. Any public service can be abused by the public. So we're still going to need walled gardens to hide behind them. And giving up a layer is a problem as well. Can we skinny dip with Windows? That's a duplicate slide. We'll just move right along. What about invited threats? The thing, virtualization. Okay, so if we can't make secure programs, maybe we can make secure containers to put those programs within. This is not a new idea. Multics was doing stuff along these lines back in the 60s. But it is something that seems to be hitting its own now. VMware just went public. I think it's very promising. You load up grandma's Windows system into a virtual memory system. Grandma runs. When she's done, you throw it away and you put a fresh copy in there. And even if she clicked in the wrong place, nothing got out. I think that's very promising. There are a lot of papers going on in various virtualizations. I'd like to see a lot more. I think configuring it is the hard part. How do you actually put shackles on something but still have it be useful? What do you actually save between browsing sessions? For most people, you save the bookmarks and nothing else. If that's true, then you could set up some sort of sandbox that says, okay, here are your bookmarks from before. Run, do whatever you want. Good, everything's gone. Take your bookmarks back. And that's a much simpler interface. So I'd like to see virtualization of client software in all operating systems. I can see it in Windows as well. I think that'll help the servers nicely and so on. End-to-end, I think we're going to see fewer firewalls. People are going to emerge some more. Microsoft is developing more of these, and I don't just mean students sharing software. Internet irregulars. This is another interesting part of the internet. I didn't really cover much of this. Nationalistic people. I've got an entire different talk about how you can go help the feds fight their battles. I'm going to skip this one. IPv6. IPv6 has been 3 years away since 1993. I think maybe it might be 3 years away within a year or two. Looks like, well, we're actually running out of addresses. Slower than we thought, but there is a zero crossing coming. And I don't see any migration for intranets, though. A corporation inside, why would they spend all that money? You've got to double all your firewall rules just to get this other address space in there. So let's see. Security in a nutshell, the third character crashed the server in '69, and we've had pretty much the same sort of problems ever since. Yet we're still getting our work done. I think the internet is working. Like a lot of other things, can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. Yes, we are there yet. The internet has done well. It's astonishing that the technology has scaled as well as it has. Who would ever need 2 to the 32nd addresses for this network? The software, however, could be a lot cheaper to maintain. We could give you those 3 hours back to grandma, I think, and I think it's going to happen. And we ought to win. It's our hardware. You know, I get to buy stuff and do it myself. I can control what's here. If I care about it, I ought to be able to make it work. And thank you for your attention. Look at that, 59 minutes and 55 seconds, according to my Macintosh.